Hey, and welcome back. I do plenty of scavenging all over Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace, but one of the sources I'm not using very much for searching for used drums is at garage sales. Now, occasionally I'll see a Facebook listing for a garage sale and they might have added drums or musical instruments to the description, and that's pretty much the only way I find out about these instruments available at garage sales. So at the start of this summer, the last week of May, I saw one of those very listings on a Friday night, and it said drums, musical instruments, among plenty of other things, and that the garage sale would be opening up Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Now, in one of the pictures, buried away in the corner where you could barely see it, I could see a few drums, and as I looked closer, I noticed one of them to be a Vistalite shell, or at least I thought, and then another one to be a snare drum that looked very much like a DW with those distinct round turret lugs. I decided to wake up early and get there right away at 8 a.m. to check out for myself, and to my surprise when I got there, I saw that I was totally right, and it was a DW collector snare, along with a Vistalite drum that seemed like a floor tom, and then also an old 80s Tama Art Star or Grand Star bass drum. I'm not really a pro when it comes to old Tama drums. So I talked to the owner and asked him what he was looking for each of the pieces or as a lot, and he told me that I could take all three of them if I could give him $100. So very quickly I got my wallet out, gave him the money, took the drums, and was on my way. Now, I brought them home, put them in the basement, knowing I wouldn't be able to get to them for a few weeks. And after I had a chance to really go through them, I realized that the Vistalite drum was in pretty rough shape. It had extra holes. It was a 15-inch size, so I didn't have other heads to swap out on it. And then aside from that, the Tama drum was very moldy and the shell was in terrible shape. So honestly, I just stripped that down and ended up selling some of the lugs and then the bass claws and tension rods on Reverb. And with selling those, I netted back about $60 or so after, fees and shipping. So all in all, I'm into this drum here for only $40, which is hard to believe. So here it is, the prized possession of this haul. This is a DW collector snare drum. When I measured it, it was about 4 3/4 inch deep. So not a 14 by 5, not a 14 by 4 or 4.5, but 3/4, which is very unique. This is an insane deal. This drum is in great shape. The bottom head is totally worn out. I can see it's not really balanced at all. The only thing that I'm really not in love with it is the finish. And that's because it's like this leopard print wrap. So I think I might refinish this drum. Before we get to any of that though, we need to take it apart so I can clean up all this hardware and then get to working on the shell. For any of you out there that are not aware of this, DW does a very unique thing by using special tension rods that have a finer threading, which is supposed to give you a more finite control of the tuning and accuracy. But if I'm being honest, I just find it very annoying because my whole frame of reference for knowing how much I'm augmenting a drum by turning a key a quarter turn is totally lost by using these tension rods. This thing is heavy. I think some of that is definitely due to the hardware. It's very bulky, which I think is very on brand with DW in general, but the shell feels very dense. I think it's maple. The inside has like some sort of tung oil or something like that. Maybe we'll have a better idea once we can get under this wrap. I know this is very on brand with DW, but this thing alone is super heavy. I mean, I know that's their thing, that everything is like over-engineered and super durable, but dang, this thing is bulky. So much so that I bet it even makes the drum feel like unbalanced. I know I was just calling out DW on their over-engineering, but one thing I will give them a shout out for is thank you for using an air vent grommet that you can just simply unscrew and screw back together. This is so much easier than having to break the flange on like one of those grommets that is single use only, like almost all other drums. So this is fantastic. So I've got this shell stripped down to nothing other than the wrap on the outside. And I did get a chance to see that there is a date printed in here. It's May 26th, 1999, which is ironic because I think I picked this drum up on like May 30th. So almost on its birthday. This thing is what, 25 plus years old? So this is in great shape. So I know that I'm not the biggest DW fan, but their stuff is well made and meant to last a lifetime. I knew this wrap was held on with plenty of adhesive, so I took it to the garage to try and remove with my heat gun. The heat helps loosen up the hold on the adhesive and allows you to slowly peel back the wrap and remove it. It's really important to work slowly here so you don't disrupt the outer wood ply and peel off any wood fibers, but on this drum, it went fairly quick once I got started. All in all, this took maybe 5 minutes at the most. With the outer ply now fully exposed, I could move on to sanding, starting with 80 grit so I could really wear away at the adhesive still left on the shell. This took much longer than normal because DW seems to apply adhesive around the entire surface area of the shell, not just the edges and the seams of the wrap like you'd see on many cheaper drums. I went through probably half a dozen sanding discs and a few battery swaps before I had the whole shell cleaned of any residue, and then I worked my way up through 120 and 180 grits before feeling satisfied with the look of this shell. Now, prior to adding any finish, I wanted to add some tape to the inside of this shell since the finish inside was so nice and I didn't want to disrupt that or compromise any of the stamps inside the drum. I was really excited about how clean the outer ply looked, which allowed me to skip adding any sort of tint or color and just use a clear polyurethane on the shell for a nice natural finish. I'm using an oil-based semi-gloss, so it won't have too much of a glassy sheen, and it will yellow slightly in color, which I tend to like on these natural finish drums. Since I'm using spray polyurethane, I was able to add very thin coats which dry really fast, so over the rest of the day, I was able to add between 7 and 8 coats, with occasional sanding breaks in between if a coat didn't settle in perfectly smooth. So we've got this shell looking pretty good now. The clear coat turned out nice. It's not super glossy or anything, but I like that, a little more tame. Now, I could go ahead and put everything back on, but before I do, I just want to clean up this hardware because even though there's no rust or big pitting on there, I just think it would be worth the time to clean it all up a little bit and get it looking a little more fresh. That did not take long at all, maybe like 5 minutes. The lugs were in really good shape, almost no dust or debris on them. I did go over them with the tinfoil just to clean up the couple that had a few scuff marks. The hoops were really what I spent the most time on, and they weren't that bad either. So, I don't know, if you're willing to put in like 5 or 10 minutes, you can get a drum from looking fine to very fresh and clean. Now, usually I would hand fasten on things like lugs, but these are very nice quality screws, and I'm going to be pretty cautious with this drill. So I'm going to save myself some time by doing it the fast way. So if you're keeping track at home, you may have noticed that I neglected to clean up the throw and butt plate here. And these are in fine working order and definitely plenty nice. I wouldn't mind throwing them back on this drum. But like 4 years ago, I think, maybe even 5 years ago at the Chicago Drum Show, I was scrolling through the booths, and I'm always looking for parts that I might want to use that are pretty affordable. And I found a guy who was selling a ton of DW stuff, and he had one of the DW mag throw-offs with the 3-position butt plate, and I bought it for like $20 for the whole lot. My hope is that this stuff follows the same hole pattern as its counterpart here, which I believe it does. It looks exactly the same. It'll be very fitting on a drum like this, being a DW. Okay, that was one of the harder snare throws I've ever had to install. Really, the problem is this first generation one, if you look very closely, you can see that the screws kind of angle in. And that's because when you're working on a rounded surface and you're drilling straight at each point, they're gonna kind of create this like triangular shape to it. And this one had that, but this new butt plate actually has 2 straight holes like this that are parallel. And then the gasket actually accounts for the contour so that this doesn't rock back and forth. But it means that the screw holes, instead of being like this, need to be a little wider so that the screws can go in at the right angle and attach to both sides. A few weeks ago, the folks at Evans reached out to me, just letting me know they had been monitoring the work I've been doing on YouTube and shouting out their Player Circle program. And as a thank you for my support of them, they offered to send me a whole care package of stuff with no strings attached. I made a whole unboxing about all the stuff they sent me and kind of went into more detail about the relationship I have with them. But in that box was one of their snare tune-up kits. And these are really cool because not only does it come with the top and bottom heads, it comes with snare wires, it comes with a drum key, it comes with a few other cleaning products like lug lubricant, metal polish, a cloth, and some of their EQ pods, their dampening, what'd you call it? A dampening like sticky piece. One other cool aspect too is that they have these instructions here on it, and these kind of like walk you through the process for how you might freshen up your drum on your own. This whole package comes in at like between $85 to $90, I think. And when you think about the price of ordering a UV1 head, which is $30, a snare side head, which is a little over $20, and then snare wires, which is like another $25 to $30, you're already at like $80 just on that stuff. And then you get a few bonuses in here, like the tools to work with, you get a pair of drumsticks included. So I think these are a great bargain if you're gonna go ahead and refresh your snare drum with all new heads and wires. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to take this into the studio today and do a demo for you guys, but I am going to take this to my gig tonight. I'm playing like a small house party, house concert with like a blues jazz group. And this snare feels pretty utilitarian to me, like it could be used for a lot of styles. So I think I'm going to take it with me and play it on the gig so that I can also add that feedback for you guys. So the gig last night was a ton of fun. We were supposed to play outside originally in a backyard, but because there were some thunderstorms coming, we had to move inside their living room. And this was like a 100-year-old Victorian house with a 5-piece band with a baby grand piano. So we were crammed, so I only played kick and snare and a couple cymbals. Unfortunately, I spent most of the night with like a drum tortilla dampening cloth on top of the head because we had about 40 to 50 people listening, and the bass player was like right in front of me, and there were guests and listeners like probably 5 feet away from me, and I didn't want to blast their ears off inside of an old room that wasn't doing us any favors acoustically. Even though I said this is a utilitarian drum, it's probably not something that I'm gonna tune super low ever. So let's just hear it in this one tuning and then mess around with some of the features and dampening to give you a fuller picture of this drum's range. I love this sound right now. It has like a cool amount of ring to it, which I usually love drier drum sounds. So for me to enjoy a drum at its totally opening tuning is saying something about this drum. What I will say, just from turning the snare throw on just now, it reminded me that this mag throw off is really great because it certainly grabs and holds with that magnet. But if you're a classical percussionist where you have to turn on snare wires really gracefully or quietly, or maybe playing like folk music or jazz where there's some sensitive stuff going on, where you might like turn the snare wires off to not get buzzed, but then want to turn them on really quietly, I just don't think this can do it quietly. Like, this is what it sounds like when you just flip it on normal in the overhead mic. That is like super noticeable, more so than your standard lever throw off. Now, if I really try to baby it and come up and like keep hold on the arm and not let the magnet just like snap into place, I still hear it. It's a lot louder than most other throw-offs I have, so you gotta factor that in. If you're playing rock and roll, you probably don't care about this. You probably never turn your snare throw off, even in a song, so maybe this doesn't apply to you, but for all of my classical percussion friends out there, something you should consider. Now, I want to mess around a little bit with the butt plate. I tried this last night and I thought it was like a pretty useful tool. I'm not sure if I would do it as much as a gigging drummer, but if I was a studio guy where like you need to maintain tuning and sound through 8 or 9 takes, I think this could be useful. Right now I have it at the middle setting, so let me just play it again at the middle setting for you. Then I'm gonna knock it 1 notch lower, and then we'll go to the top setting. It's not a super dramatic difference in terms of the tightness of the snare wires, but it is certainly like 3 distinct points. Again, it does make some noise when you're adjusting it, even if you're trying to be sensitive with it. So something to factor into your decision for a drum that might have this snare setup on it. I'd love to hear what you guys think about this drum. It certainly was a total steal. To get those 3 drums for $100 and then already make over $60 selling off just some parts from one of them is pretty nuts. And when you think about it, I have nothing invested into this. I was able to use parts on hand for the restoration and the finish. I was able to get that snare tune-up kit for free. This is a great drum. I'm super excited to have it in the collection among so many other snare drums that you can go back and watch the videos for. So I'm gonna get to playing on this, and until next time, thanks.